Hello, thank you for joining me today. For this episode of Nurture Originals, we're going to be unpacking brand evolution in the context of branding and rebranding. So we're joined today by Saleha from Mizey and James from Sapphire, who both bring to the table their unique experiences in terms of branding and rebranding. So if we could start off with a small introduction. Saleha, why don't you go first?
Okay, hi, I'm Saleha and I am the creative director of Mizey, and it's a design and brand consultancy. And I started very recently, so I'm also very new to this environment. But I'm an ex-IVS alumni, so I studied communication design from there. And everything else is just, I do everything in
On your
between.
Instagram.
Yep. So go follow me on Instagram, guys.
James, how about you?
So I'm James Aparicio, the Chief Brand Officer at Sapphire. I've been there for the past 2 to 3 years. My background is fashion, training as a designer, and then working through to becoming creative director, and then working into marketing as well. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to have worked all over the world, and blessed enough to have ended up here, especially in this room with you two.
That's so sweet.
I think we can end it here. We're good.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Tune in next week for another podcast episode.
All right. So before we get into rebranding and why that happens and what we do before it and then after it, let's talk about what a brand is, right? What are the elements that comprise of a brand? And when we begin, branding an organization, what are the key things that we need to sort of take into account? Is it just the visual element? Are we looking at, subliminal messages that we want to put out to the users? So what is the thought process behind first creating a brand? And then we'll talk about, throwing all of that away and then rebranding it. James, let's have your thoughts.
So I think brand these days is a word that's kind of thrown around a lot.
Yes.
Like people throw luxury around.
That's true.
So for me, the pure sense of kind of what a brand is or should be is something that has a distinct identity to it and is consistent in that identity. But it's something that communicates to the audience, not just visually, but also on a sort of emotional and sort of character level as well. So it's like an onion. It's sort of it's multi-layered, and yeah, you need that kind of like depth to be, what I believe to be a true brand rather than just a throwaway brand.
That's true. And has that been your experience as well?
I agree with him. I think a lot of people always go like, oh, I'm going to create a brand. I want a brand. But brand is not just a name or a logo. I think that's what everyone thinks it is, but it's actually someone's experience with you. So even as people, we are brands. I'm a brand, you're a brand. So like, when someone talks about you and they go like, oh, this person is this way, or this is kind of what I feel about this person, that's their brand. For example, Chandler was a funny person, so that was his brand, right?
True.
So brands are not how you look. That's a part of it. How your arm is a part of your body, but it's not a human body. So that your human body is a brand. It has the emotions with it. It's a voice and tone, the messaging, and the look of it comes with it.
Right. And in some of your content, you've mentioned how, people are able to change their clothes without changing their personality. And that's what a brand should be.
Yeah.
Is that how you feel about rebranding?
Yeah, I do feel that way about rebranding. But also a brand does not necessarily have to just always look the same.
Right.
You can still be funny and communicate the same features or the same essence with looking slightly different. Someone might dye their hair color, does not mean their brand changed, right?
True.
So like that's why I look at brands like human beings or people, because every person has a distinct personality, but they do change their appearances here and there, but does not mean that they change who they are. And that's what their brand is. So similarly, I think companies and people, when they're thinking about rebranding or even branding themselves, they need to think about these aspects as well, that it's not just how you look. Because I think even as designers, we're guilty of this, because we always go like, oh, I'm a brand designer, but you're just a visual identity designer, which is a logo, a color. You don't create brands.
Yes.
The people that are behind a company kind of do that with their vision and their voice and everything like that.
And I want to take this point and apply it to the recent Sapphire rebrand, right? Because I feel like it was very sort of delicate and understated. There weren't like, oh, we're going to change, everything about us. We're going to come in very bold. So is that sort of the approach you were going for as well when, you started this entire thing?
Yeah. In some respects, yes. So we got to the point of wanting to do a rebrand. By just looking at the different assets that we kind of use. So be it the physical bits of the stores where the logo appears, to then the till receipt, to then obviously digitally. And so over the years, we've been sort of simplifying the logo. And it got to a point where it wasn't digitally friendly enough, the logo. And so we wanted to create something that was resonated with kind of modernity, but also had a timelessness with it, so it wasn't 3 years down the line that we're going to end up kind of hating it, but it could also then work on different aspects of product and assets as well, so from store to till receipt, to then menswear, to the kidswear, to beauty. And so what we want Sapphire to be is kind of like a canvas for kind of like the product. And so the brand has this sort of constant idea of kind of modernity to it, and it's interesting what you were saying about sort of how people change. So part of our ethos is forever evolving,
right?
And so I thought you explained it really well.
Thank you.
That bit. And so forever evolving is kind of part of the concept of Sapphire. And so we wanted to create then this logo that would allow products and product categories to sort of develop and grow and apply itself on there, but also it then extends to our new stores that we've got. So although subtle, there's a lot of technology integrated into them. We've kind of bucked the trend by sort of introducing sort of smooth, flowy lines and not flooding the light like a football stadium or cricket stadium, sorry. And so, it's about sort of having an immersive and an enjoyable experience in there, but letting the product kind of speak as well. So it's sort of subtly bold. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
Maybe? Well, yeah, I'm allowed to say that.
Yes,
But yeah,
of
is that
course.
right? I mean,
It is. You're the chief brand officer of Sapphire.
It's
You
subtly
can
bold.
Say whatever you want.
And did you find, that initial conversation difficult to have, approaching it with the larger team and talking about, this is what I feel like about our brand and this is where I think we need to go, and then having that conversation internally?
Yes and no. So there's always a driving force behind the business. In terms of sort of wanting to sort of go on to be the next thing, and what our next stage of growth is, and so it's sort of championed in that side, but then also from the other side you've got it's 9 years old, Sapphire at the moment, and it's had phenomenal growth. And so there's a side of the business that's like, just don't break anything.
Right.
If you're going to improve it, make sure you're going to sort of, it's a good improvement.
Right.
But, you try to be careful. There's only so much you can do in terms of sort of, sense checking things. But so yeah, there was kind of a cautious enthusiasm to have it. I mean, how long it takes these things. And when we did the logo, everyone just thought, oh, you've just used Helvetica.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, no. It's sort of like, it was a 12-month process of, having a foundation and, deciding the right kerning between the letters, etc.
That, oh my God, thank you for bringing that up. People don't talk about that.
Yeah, there's not enough
takes
kerning
so
respect.
long. And a lot of people also, whenever you talk about rebranding, they go like, oh, is that it? Like, it's not that different.
Yes.
You're like, okay, don't fix what ain't broke, right? Sometimes you don't need to have a very big change. It just needs slight improvements.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies have done that, and we don't even know that they're constantly doing those little changes with their like logos and then their identities. But as consumers, we just like adapt to it. But the designers know what's happening, right? We see the little changes, and we're like, they fixed that.
Yeah.
That needed fixing.
I was wondering, because you approach this from a slightly different angle where you come in externally to the company and then approach their brand in a different way. So like James mentioned about Sapphire wanting digital consistency. So for example, when you worked with Maqsad or, any of your other clients, did you feel that they had like clarity of thought in what they needed? Or, did they know why they wanted a rebrand? And how much did you have to go into it and be like, and try to figure out that is a rebrand the right thing, or are you just bored?
A lot of times I think clients overall, even if I'm a client, I probably don't know what I need, right? That's why we kind of go to the doctor. We don't tell the doctor that I'm sick. They kind of go like, okay, this is what's wrong with you.
And then you get upset when they tell you nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah. So I think many times clients might not know exactly what they need because they don't have that background. And that's completely all right. That's why we're there, to guide them and consult them, right? So they come to us and then they go like, okay, I think I need all of these things. A lot of times they're naming a lot of things, and as a business you'd be like, you know what, I'm gonna make more money from this, but they don't even need those things. You kind of break it down and you're like, this is what you actually need, and this is where the clarity comes in. And as a communication designer, it's my job to find what their actual problem is. So you need to listen more, to ask them, okay, why do you think that you need this? And you kind of also research their like social media, for example, or even just like what people that buy from them say about them, to kind of figure out, okay, where is the clarity that needs to be there? Because a lot of times it's not there. Even they don't know what they need. So I think you need to really ask the questions, because if you just send them a form and they're like, can you fill this up and then I will give you the services, it's not going to work that way. You need a lot of it to just have a communication with them and then figure out, okay, this is where the improvement needs to come in, and that's what we need to do. And a lot of clients have come to me wanting to like change their logos and everything, but there's nothing wrong with their logo. There's nothing wrong with their colors. There's nothing that they need to change. Maybe it's just their marketing team that needs to be more proactive at marketing. So they don't even need a rebrand. It's just that, just put some more effort in the marketing.
How does that conversation go?
A lot of times they go like, oh, do you not want a business? But I'm like, no, I don't want to mess, not that, like, I don't want to like exploit anybody, because at the end of the day, if I do a bad job, my name's on that thing, right? And as a designer, I don't want my name to be on something that I don't think is needed or is not fulfilled properly. So.
But then what about the end result? Because often where you said that,
then they go like, can you do marketing for us? A lot of people come to me for marketing jobs as well, because they go like, I like how you do your marketing.
We like how you do your marketing as well.
Thank you. But I'm like, I don't give marketing services. It's just branding and design, because that's what I specialize in. But yeah.
But then with the client, you're saying they don't always know what they want.
Yeah.
Is the decision or the final decision of kind of where everyone lands kind of where you would have landed, or sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and go, I think, fine.
Right. When you're communicating, one of my teachers taught us how to like guide someone's thinking. So it's not me saying anything. I'm just asking questions. And then they come to that conclusion themselves, where they go like,
smart.
When they go like, you know what, I see what you mean, you're kind of right. I'm like, I'll send you a document. You can kind of tell me if that works for you. And a lot of times they go like, I think this is the right way to do it, because I don't want anyone to come to me and then I go like, okay, I'm not going to work for you, or this is not going to work out. It's not a good taste, right?
You have to lead them.
So I always guide them to thinking if they need it or not. And they're really smart people. Everyone is, anyone who's running a business. So they figure out that if they need a service or not also.
So we talked about just now how, it's not always just redoing the logo and making the colors different and brighter, right? There's a lot of personality that's involved with a brand. But how does one go about building that personality? What is it that you do or that you can do in the messaging that you put out that conveys that personality that you've got in your head for the brand to the people? James.
So it's time to unpeel that onion.
Yes, let's get into it.
So, obviously within the brand, we've got some sort of key values and some sort of traits that we want to have as a constant.
Yeah.
And I think all brands at some point have to sort of make sure that there's a good balance of coming from like a fashion and a retail point of view, that the conversation and the communication isn't always a transactional one. So you need to create another form of communication that allows the consumers to engage in things. And so that engagement is from either sort of seeing a post or being involved in an activity or an activation, but even down to service as well. And so there's a lot of brands that would say, quality, but then the service might be great or the product is terrible, or but there's a bit of a disconnect. So if you say quality, for example, it needs to be a constant across every sort of touchstone. And then for us as a brand, we're looking to kind of expand out of in terms of what we communicate in, sort of out of it just being product and fashion. And when you look at fashion and how that's always kind of connected to the arts and to music, there's about sort of supporting and growing sort of young talent that's coming through. There's so much that we need to sort of like be expanding on, and some things we do already and do really well, and one of the things I'm most proud about with Sapphire is sort of the responsibility side and the philanthropic side of the business, which is great. We genuinely treat everyone fairly and try to do our bit, in terms of reducing the impact of kind of what we do, but then there's other bits that we need to start doing more of. So I think just having a broader sort of message and bit of communication that resonates with customers is something that's more than just buy this is needed.
And it takes a long time to build that consistency across different mediums, and then be able to get that message across to people in the way that they, then start understanding it.
That involves, consistency, but also then the other side of the argument, well, not argument or discussion, sorry, discussion, is that, see, everyone at work will be saying, oh my God, I wish James was more like her with her sort of calm, sort of like mannered and thing, if there's a disagreement, it's kind of like, no.
If you bring a disagreement, I'm not going to be calm anymore.
Okay.
Let's try that.
So, when you're doing non-transactional communications and activities, there's no immediate return.
Right.
So it's kind of like, okay, so you're spending this, where's the return?
Right.
And so then, it's another form of discussion with kind of the spreadsheet people and the finance people in terms of...
Such a good point, because I think rebranding, a lot of it is non-tangible.
Right.
Things happen and they go like, okay, the numbers aren't coming in. And then you're like, it takes a while. You let it marinate. Yeah. And even with consistency, the term, a lot of people think consistency only means, again, using the same logo everywhere or the same colors. But consistency means consistently spreading the same message as well. And the value and messaging aspect, a lot of people don't understand, is actually for internal purposes. So internally, you understand what the value and messaging is. So everything is consistently representing that. So if your product is about sustainability, then your work environment needs to be like that. The way that you sell your product needs to be like that. Your product itself needs to be that way. The way you promote it, the communication methods need to be sustainable as well. So that's how you really embody it. If you tell people I'm sustainable, it doesn't mean anything. What you say is marketing again. But what the person experiences or your customer experiences, that's branding. Yeah. If Apple goes like, we want to empower our people. I do feel empowered using Apple because my MacBook has helped me make like a living for myself, right? So their products do help you feel that way. So them saying that, but also the product saying it as well, their communication saying that as well. That's what creates that brand. It's not, oh, I've written these brand values and you go to the office and they're on the wall and that's it. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to really embody it and, you know, represent it in every form of communication as well. I think Duolingo does it really well, where they're like these quirky people and then they're kind of unhinged, right?
We're
on
a
their
big
social
fan
media.
of Duolingo here.
Right. So the way that the way that they communicate themselves, everywhere it's like consistent in that way as well. Even Duolingo in India, Duolingo in Italy, like everyone talks the same way. So there's that there's a brand to that.
Yes.
So consistency not only comes in the form of, oh, you have to post every day at 9 p.m. because a lot of marketing people kind of, hit on that. But consistency means consistently communicating the same thing and also embodying it within your people as well.
Yeah.
So your people need to think that way as well.
Yeah.
Isn't there a challenge you face specifically because, you know, your engagement with these clients is short term? So then how is it that the personality that you're imagining for the brand when you're reworking it, how do you, you know, make sure that that gets communicated to the rest of the team? And then once you're no longer involved with the client, how does that remain consistent?
I think the easiest way is having the brand guidelines document that kind of tells them what it is.
Yeah.
That's the easy answer. But again, when you're rebranding, you need to involve the stakeholders, right? You need to involve the people that are in the company to understand what their customer really needs. Because again, your brand is not for yourself. It's for your customer. So you need to make sure that whatever you're communicating resonates with the people you're trying to sell to, right? So if I create a brand for someone, it shouldn't be what I think the brand is. It should be what their customers and what they are trying to communicate to the customers. And then, to kind of sustain that, a lot of times if I usually keep tabs on like the people that I work with and see if everything's going well. I offer retainers as well if they need like my assistance. But a lot of times, you can just again consult them. I totally forgot what I was gonna say. That's a little embarrassing. But you took that cool, man. But I forgot what I was gonna say.
But I think I mean, I thought you was making a good
really
point
good point
in terms of how you have to know what you want to communicate to the customers, and I think that's really important. So a lot of brands start up, although everyone on every kind of like YouTube video or Instagram video will tell you what matrix to kind of fill out and everything else. And, you know, I don't know who does that. When you
That's why he stays off of LinkedIn, the matrices.
When you're starting off on like a small business setup, you know, often they're done through kind of like passion or just kind of like an initial sort of like idea. And it gets to then that sort of, and it was the case of kind of like Sapphire, you know, they kind of knew what they wanted to do and they did it, and then it had like a skyrocket, and then it was like everything was such an upward trajectory that everyone was just playing catch up all the time. And so it got to the point where it was like, okay, so what is it that we're wanting to do? And so yes, it was about then sort of like knowing first what you're wanting to do, but then how you wanted to communicate that to the customer. How the customers wants to sort of resonate with that. So I think, you know, you have to know what you want your brand to be.
And impact is something that we should definitely, you know, talk about. Getting into how rebranding creates impact, let's talk about that. So when you guys are planning for it, when the planning process is happening and then obviously the execution is happening, are there goals that the team has in mind? Are there success metrics for, you know, we're going to roll this out and then this is going to happen and then we're going to be able to say that we're successful? So are those things that you keep in mind when you're starting the process, or does that come later? How about we start with you?
So yes, well, there's always a plan, and the I mean, what we start on is obviously first sort of reaching a logo that we kind of like to look at, and then sort of determining, you know, and so that cross-checking is, you know, does it speak what we want the brand to be, Does it complement the product? Can it be used in kind of like all the various ways as well? So be it in a physical state, in a digital state, sort of supersized, low, smaller, overprint, just by itself. Can it take different colors, etc.? Then the hardest thing is really then the rolling out of it, and sort of making sure that it's executed properly,
right?
And that that sort of it's used in kind of like its right manner. And so you can have all the brand guidelines in the world of kind of like logo use, and especially with a simple logo, if you give it to one of the multiple vendors and they'll just go, well, that's just Helvetica, isn't it? I don't need to use the attached Illustrator file on that. I'll just punch that in myself. And so I think the hardest thing is when you're rolling it out is making sure that it's applied properly, but in every aspect, so from our side, it's not just the stores or the digital bit, it's from the cardboard boxes that the vendors kind of like ship product in to is it fine on the staff card and every sort of element. And then in terms of measuring it, you never really know until you kind of hit the button, in terms of, did it work, didn't it work? And I think you keep an eye on that in terms of, bit of brand health and customer engagement and feedback and focus groups. But it's like touching on what you said earlier, it's not just a logo, it's in everything else that goes. Yeah.
It's an experience, like your brand is an experience. And it's kind of funny because I was thinking back about what was the first project that I've ever done and it was a cloud kitchen, Sofra Karachi. And that whole thing was about...
What is that?
Okay, so Sofra, I'm getting to that. So the Sofra Karachi was a cloud kitchen restaurant, and it was inspired by the Ottoman Empire, and then their dishes were like Ottoman inspired. They used a lot of Indian miniature and Ottoman miniature to represent that, and then even their platters were like these brass platters. So everything was about experience with Sofra, and that's the first brand I worked on. I did not do the logo for them, but they got a calligrapher to do that for them. But the whole experience on social media, plus like how it's sent out, because it's a cloud kitchen, so it's not a restaurant. It's really difficult for having a certain experience for your customers, right? Yeah. So they would send in the food in these brass platters, and then the delivery people would dress in that outfit. And we also made a Spotify playlist with music that people can play while they're having the food, so that there's an experience with the brand. Because again, like we talked about before, it is an experience. So when you are creating a brand, it's just not, you can't measure a lot of these things because like I mentioned before, it's very non-tangible. So you just feel what are the people saying online, how is it perceived, focus groups like he mentioned. So that's kind of how you can test it out. But it's not like, okay, it's not very black and white where you're like, okay, this worked, this didn't work. It takes a while as well to like measure and marinate it. So it's kind of difficult to do it, but I think it's also not very set in stone on how different brands measure their success also. It's different for everybody.
Yeah, so that's
for
something
their objectives as well.
Yeah, that's something I think we have been struggling with as well, just to understand that, all right, if we put in the effort to say rebrand Nurture or rebrand Arbisoft, then how do we know that it worked? And can we even know that it worked? And how far in the future are we able to say that it worked?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the challenge that because we don't sort of have that either experience or understanding of branding, we're not able to set those success metrics anyways. But so I'd be interested to learn if it is as abstract as you think.
A lot of it also after the branding is done in terms of the strategy and thinking side, the marketing really comes in after that. And if that isn't done well, it's very difficult to communicate what you're trying to communicate to your customer. So even if your product is there and your services are great, but if the marketing is not communicating to people, then it's very difficult for people to even understand what you're doing. And that's what I learned from my experience with Sofra, because we did not market it in the right way. So the customers were like, everything looks really good. How do I order the food? That was a problem that we figured out. We worked so hard on figuring out, okay, the strategy is going to be like, this is how the food's gonna look, and this is how the visuals are gonna be, and this is like we're gonna have music and everything. But then we didn't like market it the right way, so the people could not really experience it anymore. Right. So the branding thing kind of not flopped because it's still doing really well, but it didn't have that impact that we thought that it will. So after, like you said, you don't know if it's going to work out or not. Right. That's when the marketing team comes in and they kind of help you communicate that to your customer.
And that was really important for us. So we've got a lot of loyal customers who, you know, thankfully have a connection with the brand. Thank you. We've seen it loads of times before, you know, sort of established brands who have kind of like just done a rebrand, and there's been kind of like kickback, you know, in terms of, oh my God, what have you done? You know, you've ruined it. That's it. No more. I'm not interested. So when we rolled out the rebranding, and it was part of the, you know, strategy of just not the logo, it was also then the new stores and the new packaging, and then, you know, even down to some service aspects as well, is that we unfolded it like a story. So we, you know, to open the door and coax them into sort of, you know, this is what we're thinking, this is why we're doing it, it's part of our forever evolving kind of like journey, and then, you know, this is how we ended up on this new logo and the new concept, and, you know, stay tuned, there'll be more things to come. So it's about connecting and engaging with them, rather than, you know, someone just suddenly turns up to the store or goes online and goes, what have they done?
Yeah. So essentially, don't do what Twitter did with.
Well, yeah, I mean, essentially no, but I mean, you could say that that was one of the greatest marketing campaigns ever to sort of, you know, they say there's no such thing as bad news,
right?
You know, everyone's talking about it, even if it's a love or a hate thing, everyone's talking about it. I mean, there were, one of the most recent ones was Tropicana did a rebrand, and I think I don't know, it knocked something like 30% off their stock value,
right?
Just from the rebrand of the logo. But you know, that's you know, one would have hoped that they would have done some focus groups on something like that. You know, a multi-billion-dollar sort of global sort of like brand. You don't just do that in a corner.
I think that's a very good point as well. Like when you are rebranding, you need to have testing stages with your rebrand. Movies do this a lot, where they have movie screening tests. So they kind of show it to their ideal customers and they ask them, what do you think? Because when you're working so closely on a certain project, you know everything and why you're doing something. But in hindsight, you might not even like see certain aspects that is not being communicated. It's in your mind because you worked on it, but do the people understand what I'm trying to say? So it's best to test it out with those people as well. And I think that's what Tropicana should have done, to see if those people kind of even understand it. And again, you need to market it that, hey guys, it's still me. I look a little different, but it's still me. And this is why I look a little different.
Dyed my hair a little bit.
Yeah, dyed my hair, got a new fit from Sapphire West, you know.
Thank you.
So it
learning this from everyone.
So it really, you really need to communicate. Again, it all comes back to communication and effective communication. So why are you doing it? Some people might be like, okay, did you guys even need a rebrand? Like as a customer, you might think that. But if you have a story, because everyone likes stories, it's easier for a customer to understand. And I've tested this out myself in one of like my posts as well, where I broke down a post in terms of design. And then in one post, I didn't do that. And I saw if people what people liked more, even though one post design might have been better, but because there's no story behind that where I'm explaining how I did it or why I did something or why I chose a certain color or why I chose the way this looks, people probably didn't resonate with it because I'm a designer, but my consumer is not a designer. That's not why they're there, you know? Yeah. But any company, not everyone's going to be like a rebrand or branding person that's going to be like, oh, I like what you did there. I like the kerning. They don't care about that. They just care about, okay, there's a story. I like the story. I resonate with it. So I think it's really important for the storytelling bit to be there.
And I think because a lot of consumers get really passionate about brands as well. And so it was always interesting in the case of Celine, the design label. So when Phoebe Philo was there in her tenure, and sort of modernize the image in terms of what the look and what the designs were like. And so you had Celine, and then when she left and Heidi Slimane came along, and the rebrand was then just taking the accent off the E. And so, there was just then this immediate divide of kind of like the original consumers of, Celine, of kind of Phoebe Philo, who set up then sort of, old Celine accounts and, Phoebe Philo Celine, and, who didn't want to then transform over to, to this new sort of like era of what Heidi was doing at Celine. But that's where you need to be, careful. You can't just come and, flick the accent off and go, it's my brand now.
Yeah,
I'm
again,
doing that.
It's not about you, it's about your customer. And I think the one really good point that just came to my mind after what he said was that testing is important, because a lot of people are very like passionate about your brand or about a brand that they wear, because it represents them. So if you pick a specific company to like wear clothes from, it's because you feel like they represent you. So when you do testing, they feel like, oh, I'm being involved into this process. So even if you change into something that they would have hated if you didn't involve them, but if you involve them, they feel like they've been a part of it. So
there's ownership.
There's ownership there. So if you just go on and go like, okay, guys, there's a new logo. It looks like this. This is how it's going to be. Goodbye. They're going to be like, huh? It's kind of like even in your family when someone just makes a decision and you're like, hey, that's kind of off.
Yeah.
It's like that because a brand is a family as well, right? You have all these people who belong to that community. So when you just make a decision without involving those people, it's going to have a backlash. That's why people had that for like Baskin Robbins as well, or all these other companies. That maybe if there was a story there and they involved certain people, you would have been like, oh, okay, I'm okay with this decision, So I think that aspect is really important as well.
There's something really interesting in what you mentioned, which is that brands represent people and that's why people are loyal to them. But so for example, Sapphire has a lot of different lines, right? And so we're doing Western, we're doing Eastern, we're doing makeup, we're doing perfumes, we're doing a lot of different things. How do you get one brand to represent that number of people, or a lot of different types of people, and still have all of them stay loyal to you?
Yeah. So it's tricky. And as we kind of go on with introducing all the different multiple sort of like product lines, there's some bits that will then sort of grow and become like their own brand. So, I mean, one of the things we've got with the Sapphire West sort of sub-brand in there is that, it jolts a little bit because you've got Western right next to kind of like Eastern, but as that kind of grows, that will eventually sort of, fly the nest and become its own standalone brand. But ultimately, we're offering the lifestyle solution, for those who connect to the brand, for having a modern lifestyle, for people who connect to a brand that has some sense of responsibility about it, that engages in a not always transactional way, that is involved in sort of arts and cultures that they sort of can resonate to. And so what we try not to do is to appeal to everyone, because I think the golden rule is if you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. Yes. And so you need to have kind of like a bit of a point of view, and you've got different levels of that. As a mass brand, you can't be so niche, but especially from our point of view, it's a very crowded market. It is. Eastern brands in Pakistan, it's ultimately everyone sort of has quite similar products and sort of like similar peak times of years of trading and selling as well. And so to try to sort of still resonate with the customer in a unique way, that kind of then reflects the brand, and that brand then communication isn't just then sort of like the logos or the visuals, it's also then the product that the designers create that sort of reflects kind of the brand look as well, is then something that somehow all kind of like comes together, and we can sort of do it in some respect. And I think one one of the great examples is someone like Zara,
Hmm.
a huge global company
Yeah.
that has so many different sort of like types of looks in terms of product. You can buy your formal dress to your tailoring to then your ripped vintage jeans to then your sort of little collection, studio collection pieces. But it feels the same, even though you've got different kind of product in there.
Yeah, like when you think of Zara, you think white. You think like those leaves in the back for some reason. Like I would think that, or I would think like beige colors like that. So there are elements that are similar, but because the overarching canopy is the same, but then they have little bits and pieces, and that's what makes their personality. Because like even human beings have all these multiple facets. You might be able to talk to your mom and your sister and your brother and your friends, everyone in a different way, but they still love you and they still like, so I think brands are like that as well, where you're talking to multiple people, but they still come back to you because they resonate with you. And I think the easiest way is to look at it as a person. So
yeah, I think so. Nurture went through like a rebellious teenager phase,
right,
where we were like, all right, so we're doing something cool and different, so we're gonna look nothing like Arbisoft, because we want to be our own brand and we want to have our own personality and we want to talk to a different subset of people. But yeah, we're coming back now. We've grown up a little bit. So I think what you were talking about with the Sapphire West being a subset, we have now realized that Nurture is essentially a subset of Arbisoft, and our some part of us needs to be linked back to that. So yeah,
I think you can also benefit a lot from just having Arbisoft as your main branch that you kind of brought Nurture into, because that's already a name out there.
Right.
People already know what Arbisoft is and resonate with it, and you guys have customers. And for them to go to Nurture and understand Nurture is easier than just starting something from complete scratch.
Absolutely.
So you have a backbone, so you can always use that to cater to your newer form of audience, which is design and everything else you guys are doing.
Are you billing for this?
No.
Oh.
Don't give her any ideas.
I'm just gonna make a check really quick. Send it to you guys.
I want to jump back to a point that we were making earlier about execution and how that is, equally as important as the planning and strategy, and then the after. So all of that is important, but the execution is important. And that's a challenge that I feel like my team faces as product designers, because you're designing one thing, but then there's someone else who's implementing it. And there's a lot that gets lost in translation, right? Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, it has been. A lot of times, I think you kind of learned this back in art school, where you figure out that your initial plan is not going to be the final thing.
Right.
And that's something I experienced in my thesis, where my idea was completely different. And then, I got input from my advisor. I was one of the few people who stuck to what my idea was, and I'm glad I did. But a lot of times it changes, and that's the art of like communication. That's where it comes in, as someone who is doing branding for somebody, you need to make sure that you're not just talking, you need to make sure that they're listening to what you're saying. If it doesn't work some way, you need to communicate in another way, because I don't blame the people that come to us for help for branding or rebranding, because they don't know that. That's why they're coming to us. So it is our responsibility to make sure that, okay, this is not what I meant. So you ask them more questions. You keep asking them questions in different ways to make sure when they, you redirect the conversation, and you make sure that the answers you're getting are affirming to what your plan is. And that kind of helps as well. And if you feel like in execution, if it's not coming through, just communicate it. You can always regroup with the people, and go like, guys, this is why we're doing it. A lot of times we're always explaining the what we're doing. This is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to be. Why are you doing it? So when they know the why, they might even be able to give you a better idea of how to implement it, because they know their customers more than you do as a designer or a brand designer who's just come in from the outside. So it's really important to make sure that there's a conversation that's happening during strategy and post, like implementation. So I think that really helps. So involving everyone and making sure that everyone understands what you're saying.
Right.
Also, don't use fluff words, you know, in your communication.
Absolutely.
A lot of times, because I used to work for a B2B company and I did marketing for them, they would always use fluff words. And I was like, your target audience are business people, not technical people.
Right.
Tell them the benefits of it. Don't tell them the things that like it has like
that you're doing on the back end.
Right. Tell them the benefits as a business person. What do they want to hear? So as a communication designer, I need to make sure whoever's sitting in front of me knows the language that I'm speaking. So it's not their responsibility. It's more of mine because that's why I'm here.
Do you feel like there was part of your strategy that got lost in translation when the Sapphire rebrand was executed?
No, immediately after the launch of it, no. Everything was kind of, because I was sort of the classic sort of brand officer megalomaniac that made sure that kind of like everything was great. Yeah. But I think you're really right with what you touched on. It's about the conversation of things. And so what happens is sort of is after the period of time of launch. So we launched the rebrand at the beginning of this year. And so we're constantly sort of generating new concepts, new marketing campaigns, new shoots and everything else. And with the rebrand was then, yes, with the logo and the next gen stores, but also then what the image style should be as well. But then as everyone starts getting comfortable and, you know, after about 2 months, it's like, oh yeah, that's our logo. It's fine. It's like, but you know, we're a bit bored using kind of like, you know, the brand font now. Can we not just use another font? It's like, no, you can't. Or, you know, you know, can we not just put it vertically, the logo? It's like, no.
Or they're like, oh my God, it's so like monotonous. Oh my God, I'm getting bored. You're like, guys.
Yeah.
There's a purpose behind it.
Yeah.
You need to repeat. And it's interesting because, you know, you would say, okay, I've said it like 4 times. The people probably get no. Because you might have seen it like 4 times before, but James probably hasn't. James has only seen it once. So I need to say it 4 more times. Right. I need to say it 4 more times. So, because there are people that are going to keep coming in. They don't know that what you are and what you do. So you need to communicate it constantly. It might be boring for you, but it works. And you need to
for
keep
the
doing
newer
that.
people, for them to, you know, sort of absorb themselves.
And I think, you know, well, Apple's a brilliant sort of case of what you said. You know, you couldn't imagine like Apple opening up like a, you know, raw wood store, or, you know, Apple then suddenly, you know, getting rid of the logo and just writing kind of like Apple or something like that. So it needs that sort of guardianship, you know, the rebranding. But for us, the rebranding is multifaceted. It's not just the logo, but it's one of the things the logo use, and it's almost the thing that it's easier to kind of you know, just kind of
Apple
change.
is so consistent with their communication that every time they launch an iPhone, they go like, this is the best phone we've ever made. That's how consistent they are.
Right.
If you like search that on YouTube, there's a video of them going like, this is the best phone we've ever made. This is the best phone we've ever made.
Over again.
It's the best every year. This is the most innovative phone we've ever made. So they just ingrain that in your mind. And that's what branding is. They constantly say the same thing again and again. But then to you as a user, you would see it once a year. But for them, it's like, oh, we're saying it every year. But as a consumer, you're only seeing it once a year. Yeah. So it's not really that annoying to
that's true.
Digest that as well.
That's a great perspective. Yeah. So strategy and planning, but then consistency and execution is what helps the brand grow.
Yeah.
So what is something that you know now that if you'd known when you were starting out or when you were, you know, at a different part of your career or your journey, that would have really helped you? But you know it now, but that, you know, caused some bumps along the way.
Oh, I was really hoping you wasn't going to ask me, because I needed to kind of really rack the brain. So I've had a really diverse career.
Right.
So I started off as fashion designer.
Yes.
And then eventually into creative director. And then sort of that manifested into sort of working across design and marketing. And then sort of ended up here on as my role of chief brand officer. So
let me narrow down for you. Have you ever jumped into sort of a branding decision or it would be better if like a rebranding decision, and then halfway into it you realize that that's not really what the brand needed? And it doesn't have to be about your current role, but ever in your journey, has that ever happened?
So in terms of I think the truest thing is and it's something that you only get sort of once you've been around the block a few times, which I have compared to you, is don't ignore your gut instinct. So as designers and creative people,
yes,
you're always constantly questioning yourself anyway. And there's that horrible kind of like, self battle.
Imposter syndrome.
absolutely.
Yeah. And often, as soon as you've done the work, you often kind of, secretly hate it, or, you wish you could have done it in a different way or something else like that. And so in the business that sort of we're in, there's always a sort of constant opinions of things, as well as your own internal kind of voice and things. And I think it's even more important now for kind of younger professionals who are starting, because there's so many more experts.
Right.
So when I first started, there wasn't sort of YouTube videos or kind of, Instagram or LinkedIn to sort of where everyone professes after sort of watching a 3-minute kind of clip that, they know everything.
They've been enlightened.
Yeah. And so, yes, it's good to do research. Yes, it's good to have focus groups. Yes, it's good to sort of take on board other sort of team members or departments, kind of opinions and points of views and different aspects from the business. But ultimately, we're placed in this role or hired for this job for our expertise, and our insight and our knowledge. It's interesting because in my multiple sort of companies that I've worked across, I've yet to find people question the chief finance officer as to whether, he's used the right tax formula on a spreadsheet. But everyone's always got kind of like an opinion in terms of, the color or the style of something, because it's, easy.
Right. I think even a lot of marketing people always get opinions from the sales teams and stuff like that. This is how you should do marketing. I have a question for you though. Do you think your background as a fashion designer has helped you understand why and how brands are more effective for Sapphire?
Yeah, I think it's given me a greater understanding from kind of the customer. So I mean, 360 is such a sort of throwaway kind of like comment that we have, but for me, I literally have the whole 360 experience of kind of fashion and retail. So I've only ever been in fashion and retail, and so knowing how everything is created, understanding sort of like cuts and silhouettes and shapes and fabrics allows me, I feel, to either sort of take that into consideration in terms of communication, in terms of then even the imagery that we're sort of making. So it's really helped me, I think, on that side of things, for sure.
That's really interesting. And so you basically niched yourself without even niching yourself intentionally.
Yeah, without even knowing it.
That's
I mean,
so
thankfully,
cool.
it's like the whole of fashion kind of like niche. So
and in Pakistan, clothing and food, that's two things.
Yeah.
So great move.
I'm really, I'm just to share it. I mean, the last place I thought I would end up kind of like working would have been kind of like in Pakistan. But honestly, I really do feel blessed to have ended up here. Great people, fabulous kind of like exciting kind of like market. 2/3 of the population are millennials, so there's a sort of energy and a vibrancy, and a general excitement of things. So much talent. So yeah, I've unexpected, but I'm glad I'm
Do
here.
you want to rebrand Pakistan?
Well,
this is a collaboration.
Would they let me?
It's okay. We'll put Saleha as the face of the rebrand.
But then it's
okay.
That'll work.
I'll be the puppet master. Yes, you'll be perfect with your convincing dialogue.
Perfect.
Done.
Let's talk about that after the podcast.
Okay.
Talking about, how there's so many people who have so many opinions, especially when it comes to the creative field and branding. Do we think it's because no one is a consumer of finance, right? But everyone is a consumer of brands. And so that is why everyone has an opinion. And that is why, because if you're not, even if, you're not a consumer of that brand that you're working for, but you are still a consumer, right? So, and that is why you feel entitled to have, an opinion, a say, and think that you too have expertise in this field. Is that something that we think is possible?
I think that's a really good point. I've never thought about it that way. But yes, at the end of the day, when you are in the creative field, there are multiple consumers for it. Like for films, for everyone has opinions on films. They don't make the films, but that's who the films are made for.
Yeah,
that's the people that it's made for. So it's right that they have an opinion. But as the creative decision makers, I think it does come down to how much you want to listen to a feedback as well.
Yes.
Not every feedback needs to be taken, but also you need to really listen to feedback as well, because when people do have it, there must be a reason why they think a certain way. Sometimes you might not agree with it, but instead of taking in what they're saying, ask them why they're saying that, because that might also get them a clarity on whether their opinion is right or not. So it's really important to like listen to people. I think for me, my favorite like person to ask for feedback is my mother or my nephew, because my mom,
that's a range.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
it's like
Because they don't have a design background, but they are consumers. My nephew being a very honest person, and he is a kid, so he looks at things where he likes things to be vibrant and stuff like that. So a lot of times I think he gives me a good perspective from like a child's point of view, because they do observe the world around them a lot.
Yes.
And my mother is also not someone from the design background, but she is like very observant, and she like always breaks down films with me. So I think she's a really good critic of things. So she goes like, okay, I think this is a little empty. I'm like, oh, but that's why I'm going for that. Like that's the thing that I'm going for.
It
and
makes
she's like,
you justify
okay,
your own
communicate
actions.
that somehow.
Yeah.
Mujhe nahi samajh aaya. I don't know that you're trying to do that. So why are you doing that?
Absolutely.
Then I'm like, So she makes me think as well. So I think that really helps.
That's a very good point. Like you said, not all feedback is feedback that you need to incorporate,
Right.
but
listen to it.
yeah, it's coming from somewhere,
Right.
right?
Even if you,
Yeah.
again, like, you said, oh, your nephew, what? It's someone that you wouldn't consider getting feedback from, but you never know whose perspective might just, really break or make your thing.
Yeah.
So it's always good to listen as well. And again, like your question was, what was one thing that you would tell yourself? I still struggle with listening, to be honest, because I love speaking.
sorry.
But that's the one thing I would tell myself is just listen more.
This,
I think that's good. And to be honest, I mean, I think there's maybe I'm more weathered as I've been around the block longer than you, but
right.
But that to be a creative, but still to have that sort of yearning to kind of like an appreciation to listen to others' views. It is really important.
I think that's also the difference between an artist and a designer, because an artist is doing self-expression,
right.
But as a designer, I need to understand I'm solving a problem,
right,
with aesthetics. So it needs to look good as well. But at the end of the day, if it does not solve a problem, I'm not doing my job
for someone. And then that's the someone that you need to keep.
Yeah, and
in
if
mind.
I want to like play around and not listen to my client, that's what Mizey's communication is for. So I just have fun over there.
Which you should check out on her LinkedIn.
Yes, I'll do that definitely.
That would be
All
cool.
right. So great advice that you've given yourselves. And now I'm going to jump in and get, a little free consultancy for Nurture and ask you guys about so our brand, right? And so this is something that we struggle with a little bit because yes, it's a team of designers, but we're a different kind of designer, right? And we don't necessarily know how to put our work across the local and the international community who we want as clients, right? So what is something that you can tell me that would help me build a brand from, well, we're not from scratch, but we are somewhere in between, right? We've experimented with a couple of things. We're now sort of finding a direction. We understand what our voice and tone is. So that's where we are. But we don't really know how to be consistent with the message that we're putting out or the content that we're creating. So what's something that can help me, find a direction? Since you've been around the block.
Oh, well. So I think the first thing is and it seems like that you've got some knowledge of this already, is just know exactly what you want to do and who you want to be. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, I'll only give you two things.
All right.
3 and 4 is
for her.
Yeah.
That's where
the bill comes in.
Yeah. This is just like the testing.
Yes, this is the initial pitch. So yeah, the second thing I would say is think global rather than local.
Right.
And I don't mean that in sort of any disrespect in terms of sort of this market isn't relevant, but
of course.
One, this is such an internationally connected country.
Right.
And I think it's always easier to kind of like transform like a global point of view back into then the local one, rather than kind of like doing it the other way around, because it doesn't necessarily always sort of like translate easier that way.
That's true.
So that's what I would say. That's my 2-3 bits.
Thank you.
I think even for when you're trying to figure out what you want to do, or like why, like what is it like that your voice and tone is going to be, you need to understand why you're doing it, right? So then you know, okay, who are the people you're talking to, and if they will understand the thing that you're communicating, that will really help you create a voice and tone. Because you can't just sit here and be like, oh, I think nurture should be funny, or like I think nurture should be like this. No, you don't know that until you don't know who you're talking to. The same concept that I learned this on my thesis display, because my thesis was basically a rug making kit. So I gave people like how to make a rug by yourself with the equipment and manual and everything. So the different people that were coming on my display, I was talking to them differently. So there was this old lady that came on my display, and I was like, Auntie, everyone's using their phones these days, and like screen time is increasing, and we need to like really walk away from that. And this is like what my grandma used to do back in the day. So I'm just trying to bring that with a funky spirit to it. And then when these like teenagers came on my display, I was like, if you make a rug and this is in your room, they're going to be like, you can be like to your friends, I made that. And that's something cool for them. So it's essentially selling the same product, but to different people. But then when I understand who I'm trying to speak to when they're in front of me, I know how to speak to them. But when you're, again, talking digitally on social media, you're just putting things on a screen. So it's really important to like create a persona in your mind, who you're speaking to, if not yourself maybe, but initially just that. And then just test it out and see what works and what doesn't work. Even your team and like Nurture as a company will have certain kinds of people. That's why everyone's working together. There's a reason why everyone kind of can work together. So understand, why do you guys work together? What makes you guys work together so well? That will dictate your voice and tone as well. So it'll be easier for you to be like, okay, this is how Nurture speaks. And then even the newer people that will come onto your team will want to join because they relate to that. Not everyone wants to join a certain company because they're like, okay, that's not me and that's more me. So that will maybe help you guys figure out what your voice and tone is. And then everything else will just flow, because even we're just doing that.
And I think, I mean, just to expand on that, I think that'll make, if you ask yourself all those questions, you'll end up with something unique. Because the last thing you want to do is kind of like just be seeing, what other brands or companies who operate in a similar field as you, what do they look and feel and communicate. You don't just want to be kind of replicating the same thing again, because otherwise what's your
That's a really good point. I think market research is really important to see what other people are doing, but not what they're doing. See what works for them and why is it working for them, and then what are they doing that works for them, and then figure out why that's something could work for you. A lot of times I really struggle with letting like B2B companies understand that you don't need a blue logo. Like blue does not mean B. Like B2B B is not for blue. Trust me.
Isn't it?
Trust me, you guys can have different colors as well and still be perceived seriously.
True.
You don't need to have the navy blues and the blues. My old company as well were like, we need the blue, we need the blue. So, what helps is using different, like you guys are using a different color. That's really cool. So figure out how you guys can utilize what works for other people for yourself. Again, like how critiques go when you're in a meeting. It's nice to listen to other people's feedback. I would always stay back and listen to what works for my colleagues in school to understand, okay, am I doing that for my thing? And just like fix that where it needs to be fixed. That would really help.
That's really sound advice. And next time I'm going to come to you with a proposal plan.
I'll be waiting.
Yeah. All right. Thank you both for, sitting down with me and having this conversation. I think we've learned a lot of things that we can immediately apply to, our team, but also things that I think are going to spark a lot of conversation in, the local design space. And then hopefully we can continue doing this and come back and talk about something else that's going to, engage even a broader audience.
Does that mean you're inviting us back?
I thought we were going to Karachi. So
I love it. Yes.
Podcast at the beach.
Series.
Yeah.
It's a series.
But like the good one.
Okay. Yeah. So she'll tell us what the good one is.
I'll take you guys to the beach.
All right. Well, great. Thank you guys for joining. And
Thank you.
it's been great.
Thank you very much.